We're back at DLD talking at the 20th anniversary of the conference to some of the more prominent speakers at DLD this year, including Richard Socher, who back in 2005, Richard, you were still in Germany. Now you're in Silicon Valley. What are your memories of January 2005?
2005. So I started undergrad, and I was around this time I was in France. Actually, I was doing an Erasmus exchange year in Montpellier in southern France, and then went back to Germany to finish my bachelor's.
And you grew up in the eastern part of Germany, is that right?
That's right, yeah. I was born in Dresden. I lived in Ethiopia for 3 years before the wall came down, and then went back to Dresden, and then, yeah.
What year were you born?
1983.
So you were 6 when the wall came down?
That's correct.
Do you have any memories of the GDR?
A few. Sometimes you don't know if those are memories or the memories that your parents tell you about, and then they kind of manifest as your own memories. But one of the questions I supposedly asked when we came back from Ethiopia to Dresden, I asked Dad, was there a war here? Because there are still bullet holes in the house that we lived in. So yeah, a couple of memories.
In 1989, of course, Francis Fukuyama famously suggested that we'd come to an end of history, but of course the coming down of the wall represented a kind of new beginning in many ways, certainly for people from, so to speak, behind the wall. Is that fair?
I think it's interesting. I think my generation has had the good fortune to have lived in if you lived in most of the Western world, a surprisingly quiet time internationally in terms of like war and conflict. And we were very lucky to not have to choose to go to war, a lot of us, and that's certainly coming to a sad end right now with like Europe being attacked and war coming back to Europe. So yeah, I think history has maybe slowed down a little bit in terms of some international conflicts. Obviously, there's still Korean War and a bunch of other wars, but in the last couple of decades. But obviously, a lot of conflict in Africa. Like the world is still complex, but certainly in terms of world wars, it felt like that was very far away and a thing of the past. And the world has gotten a lot more complex again, and certainly feels like a lot of history is we're in the thick of it right now. Yeah.
The 20 years since 2005 been a remarkable time for you in terms of your own personal history as a pioneer of artificial intelligence. You've done many different things. We'll talk about that later in the conversation. But back in 2005, I'm not sure if this is a question you'll be able to answer. What was your sense of the potential of AI? Did you even understand what it was?
Yeah, so I actually decided to study, at the time, it was called linguistic computer science, and linguistische Informatik in Leipzig, Germany. And I've been very excited about the potential of combining and teaching computers language. Language is this beautiful, funny human construct where two teenagers can come together and they say YOLO, and now there's a new word, and now you need to understand what that means. And math is beautiful in its own way, where it's true even if you go a light year in that direction. It's still the same kind of math. And so I think when you try to marry those two, it naturally happens in a computer. And so I've been very excited about that world for basically over 2 decades now, and have been fortunate enough to, starting in 2010, actually push the field really significantly forward too.
You describe AI as a new language, but there are many languages in the world. Why do we need another one?
I think AI is a way to think about the world even. I think you can, if you're really good at physics, you see physics everywhere. If you're really good in AI, you also see AI everywhere, and you see how AI will impact pretty much every single aspect of the human condition. And so I wouldn't necessarily call it its own language, but it connects the language as a new way of thinking about the world.
Explain what that means. You said that when you know AI, everything you see in the world seems to be connected with AI. That might be true of religion also, for better or worse. What is AI?
AI is ultimately a field of computer science that tries to emulate intelligence and make computers more intelligent. And then you have to think about, where does intelligence come from? What kinds of intelligences, groups of intelligence are there? And we often look at human intelligence as sort of the pinnacle of it. It's not just a one-dimensional thing. There's motor intelligence, which animals have a lot of also, and we pay a lot of people a lot of money if you can, with low variance, get certain sizes of balls into certain areas. Then at low variance, you can make a lot of money, right? So motor intelligence is a kind of intelligence which is mapped into robotics in the field of AI. You have visual intelligence. Some chimps are very, very good also in visual intelligence. The mantis shrimp has incredible visual capabilities, seeing almost 4D, having trinocular vision in each one of its two eyes that can move independently. There's a lot of exciting vision capabilities in animals as well. But then you get into language intelligence, and language obviously connects deeply to thought and also to history and knowledge. And reasoning, and that's where humans start to pull away from all the other animals significantly, and that's why I think language is the most interesting manifestation of human intelligence, and hence it's usually also the area of AI that pushes the rest of the field forward. And then you can get into adjacent kinds of mathematical and logical intelligence can be its own thing. Agglomerating and accumulating knowledge is another dimension of intelligence. And AI can eventually move beyond just human intelligence and do things that are superhuman. And the way we can already do better weather prediction with AI than a human could do.
Another speaker at DLD, Richard, is Gary Marcus. I'm sure you're very familiar with his thinking. He was on the show last week, suggesting that he's concerned that generative AI might be the wrong path for AI. It might not lead us to AGI, it may not lead us where we want to go. What's your take on the history of AI in this last 20 years? Were there many options, or was generative AI ultimately when developers, entrepreneurs made the breakthrough 5-6 years ago, was it somehow inevitable?
Yeah, I've talked to Gary a lot. In fact, we drove from the airport here together last night and randomly met in the airport. So I think it's easy to criticize AI always for never being perfect, right? But it's also undeniable that AI has made several breakthrough advances over the last few years, and we're now able to do things that were impossible before. And so personally, I've worked on this idea of trying to use neural networks for natural language processing in particular since 2010. And at the time, that was a very small niche intersection. We're literally about a dozen people or so.
It was would it be fair to call it, within the scientific community, a kind of heresy?
Yeah, very much so.
You were the bomb throwers.
I've had very famous, very senior folks in the field of natural language processing telling me very, very, very strong words that it is complete and utter nonsense to try to squeeze natural language sentences into a fixed vector representation, a fixed list of numbers. And I've worked in improving word vectors. If words aren't vectors, if words aren't numbers, you can't use a neural network like a transformer or anything for them. So we're using word vectors. Then I've developed contextual vectors. So not just thinking of single words as lists of numbers, but also sentences as lists of numbers. And then in 2018, together with my co-founder, Brian McCann at U.com, We invented prompt engineering, this idea that you could train a single neural network and ask it any kind of question. You just prompt a question of what's the sentiment of this tweet, what's the summary of this document, what's the translation into German. You can prompt one model with any such question, and then it will just give you that answer. That paper was cited by GB2 and 3 papers from OpenAI, but it was also rejected because, again, it was heresy for the academic community and the field, and people said there's no such thing. Our reviewers said there's no such thing as unified question answering, not even humans, they wrote. And of course that didn't make any sense, and eventually the paper was rejected, but the ideas really changed the world.
Richard, let's go back to that community in 2010, the natural language community. Was this built around Geoffrey Hinton? He won the Nobel Prize, of course, for physics in 2024. How did you find your way into this community? You came from Germany to grad school at Stanford.
Yeah, I was very excited about AI for a long time. I started in linguistic and natural language processing, linguistic computer science, but then I was kind of disillusioned a little bit because the approaches at the time were very much unscalable, and it was very obvious to me. So I moved more into computer vision, where I felt like they were really using math to its full potential of complex variational methods and computer vision. And then I was very lucky. I wanted to get to where the best computer scientists and researchers and professors were working and had the most citations, and most of those folks were in the US. And so I ended up in Stanford, and there I was lucky again in that I knew a lot about natural language, but I was working also in computer vision, and I saw Andrew Ng actually working on the sort of precursors of the neural nets we now use, various sort of deep learning methods. And he was working in computer vision and speech recognition, because everyone acknowledged that you can use neural networks for signals that are continuous. A bunch of pixels are already lists of numbers, so you can easily feed them into a neural network and do amazing things with them. And you don't have to have a human expert saying, oh, if I want to classify a cat, I should find whiskers and eyes and a tail and things like that. You just give it raw pixels, the neural network will figure it out, or the deep learning method at the time. And so I was working with Chris Manning, who was in natural language processing, who didn't use neural networks in any way. And so I thought, oh, maybe I can take some of those ideas from computer vision and neural networks and deep learning and actually combine them with ideas of natural language processing. And that was kind of the breakthrough. And indeed, my very first talk, external talk, where I've gotten invited by someone to talk about my work, which again was mostly rejected from the standard NLP conferences, was Yoshua Bengio, who together with Jeff and Jan LeCun won the Turing Award, which is kind of the Nobel of computer science. And then the second talk was at Jeff Hinton's group. So those were the few folks at the time, those two and Jan LeCun, who encouraged me in this line of research.
Are you enjoying the fact that most people were wrong and you were right?
It's funny. At the time, I didn't. I just wanted to do work, and I wanted to get my papers accepted at conferences. Now, sometimes I wouldn't say I miss it. I'm obviously happy that the field is growing so much, but I'm now thinking about what is next for humanity. Because when for 4 or 5 years of your formative sort of career and as a researcher, you kind of get into this, like, from first principles, this is the right thing. The world just doesn't see it yet. And now everyone sees it, and literally you talk to your taxi driver and they know about ChatGPT and things like that. You're like, okay, this isn't a controversial idea anymore. This is just the standard now. And so I'm thinking now about what's next. What is next that is now a controversial idea? And I'm mostly now a CEO of U.com and an investor at AIX Ventures, so I don't get to do a lot of fundamental research anymore, but I'm working on a book called The Eureka Machine about AI for science. I think there's still a lot of ground to cover when it comes to using AI for scientific discovery, and also thinking a little bit about the science of AI itself.
I want to get to that in a second, but explain how we went from this heresy within the community, the natural language heresy in 2010, to the success of ChatGPT, Google was very much involved in this too, wasn't it?
Yeah, so Google has done an amazing amount of AI research and has spent many billions on it, and has done great marketing also on top of all of that research. And I think one of the big lessons that OpenAI has taught us is that we should not necessarily, as a community, strive for publishing a solid paper every quarter for every senior researcher. OpenAI in some ways said, no, it's better if we just focus really hard with a bunch of people and a bunch of engineers on scaling all of these ideas up further, and then building systems that do them. And maybe there's a paper with 50 authors, maybe there isn't. And I think that was a big moment for the community that changed the field.
Yeah, and just to clarify, maybe I didn't ask the question correctly. My understanding, Richard, is that there was a white paper published within Google with a lot of the ideas about natural language processing, which didn't get taken up for one reason or other within Google, but got taken up within OpenAI. Is that really the story of how we got from just another scientific idea to this core reality, a reality now that cab drivers are talking to you about?
You know, success has a lot of parents.
Yeah.
Only failure is an orphan. And so I can see myself also in a lot of those stories, right? Like when you look at the field of natural language processing on Google Scholar, I'm the fourth most cited person in that entire history of the field, largely because me and my teams, we brought neural networks into the field at all. Without that, it would have been hard to get to ChatGPT. Then we invented prompt engineering in 2018. And we were told actually by like several of the folks that started GPT-2 and that line of work at OpenAI that paper did not just get cited by them, they wrote about it in their own papers when they announced GPT-2, but it did majorly influence them because we showed that you can have a single neural network model and you just ask it any kind of question and it will just answer it. So the idea is that the task had to be given as an input to the model. That was the foundational idea there. And then yes, we also are using transformer networks. To be honest, transformers are amazing, but you can look at various research papers, including this DECA NLP prompt engineering paper, and you look at the architectures and you would see that there was attention mechanisms in all of these different papers. So whether you deleted that last bit, and the reason the transformer paper is called attention is all you need, is that you just didn't need that recurrent layer that a lot of people are using, LSTMs from Jürgen Schmidhuber and others. You could use similar things to ChatGPT, probably with LSTMs. It's just that transformers are the perfect architecture for NVIDIA GPUs right now.
And just explain, Richard, because not all our audience are as sophisticated as you. What exactly is a transformer?
Yeah, so a transformer is a specific type of neural network architecture that works incredibly well to be trained on NVIDIA GPUs and works very well for sequences such as sequences of words, as we see in natural language.
What do you make, Richard, of the governance issues, the turbulence, the controversy about governance at OpenAI? You have your own startup, I think, or you had your own startup which you sold to Salesforce. I want to talk a little bit about that in a second. But do you share the pain, the moral pain, if there's such a thing, of some of the founders of OpenAI about this unease between a non-profit and a for-profit, particularly in the area of AI, which of course is so important for the future of humanity?
Yeah, I can kind of understand where a lot of folks are coming from and why there is the controversy. Right in the beginning, it was a non-profit and people donated money to it, and they're hoping it will just be open for the world, right? In various scenarios. I think in most scenarios, if you're really successful, it's better to have more superintelligence in the hands of more people rather than fewer entities. And at the same time, as you try to scale, you realize, oh man, we need a lot of GPUs. Not many people want to donate billions and billions of dollars just for a good cause to improve the world with no way to ever get that money back. And so, as you try to scale this up, you need more resources, and then that usually leads you to a for-profit organization, which then was not aligned anymore with the original ideas of some of their founders. So I can understand how it happened and why it came about, and I can also understand why some people might be upset about it. But ultimately, OpenAI showed the world what's possible when you take the ideas of prompt engineering, the ideas of transformers, the ideas of graphics cards and neural networks and everything. You put them together, you scale them up massively, and that progressed the whole world forward. So I think ultimately, it's a great step function for humanity.
A lot of people don't trust Sam Altman, both inside and outside OpenAI. He's a controversial figure. A lot of people actually don't really trust Silicon Valley these days. The zeitgeist has shifted dramatically from a positive notion of tech to one now where there's a great deal of skepticism and suspicion. You're an insider outsider. You're a scientist, an academic, came from Stanford, then did your own startup. Now you have another startup that's heavily backed by a lot of serious money in Silicon Valley. You sold your company to Salesforce, so you know Mark Benioff quite well. You were the chief scientist over there for a while. Why should we trust the titans of Silicon Valley? So far, they don't seem to have done a great job. We have what some people call surveillance capitalism. Mark Zuckerberg is deeply unpopular for his lack of respect for people's privacy. Given that AI is such an enormous step forward for humanity, perhaps the last step, some people might suspect, why should we trust guys like yourself?
A lot to unpack there. I can talk about that for a long time. I think there are a couple of things at play here. The first thing is, and this can be used as an excuse, but I think it is also true, which is when you do stuff that has any kind of impact, it's hard to do it perfectly. And when you don't do anything, then you don't make any mistakes, and you can eventually feel morally superior because you have a perfect track record of making no mistakes because you've done nothing that is really impactful. And then it's kind of a self-enforcing loop where folks criticize, and I can see this almost like in different continents. Like Europe's doing less and less and is getting better and better at criticizing and regulating, right? And so it's easy to regulate a non-existent AI industry before it ever happens, and that's what we're seeing in Europe. So I don't know if that's ideal either. That's
not a very good argument, though, is it?
I haven't gotten to the argument yet.
Nothing's perfect, and you're always going to make mistakes.
Yeah, sorry, I haven't gotten to the argument yet.
So go back to your argument.
So that's one thing you can start with, right? And that's true, I think, to some degree. Now, of course, that's, as I mentioned already in the beginning, it's easy to use that as an excuse. You do need to still do better. I think with AI technology in particular, because like the previous industrial revolution, it's just makes not just physical labor more automated, but also intellectual labor. And because most humans have moved away from physical labor to intellectual labor, they feel very threatened by an AI that can also do various types of work for you. And I think it's also clear that indeed many jobs will change, and some jobs will change so much that they're not really there anymore, right? And you could say on a variety of fronts that we should keep jobs the way they are right now, because now is the best time. But I also struggle with that, because when I look at the past, there are a lot of jobs like riding a horse, driving a train, dealing with horses and all kinds of things, and those jobs all went away, and now we have cars, and you can use a horse if you want for fun, and some people still do, but I think they're sort of the modern day Luddites that are saying oh man, AI is going to take my job away, so I don't like AI. And that's I understand where they're coming from, right? If you're an illustrator and now an AI can just make illustrations that skill just became less valuable, and I understand why an illustrator would be really upset about that. At the same time, when you think about the outputs and you just want more articles being illustrated, more blog posts being illustrated, and we'll see more illustrations, it's amazing, right? If you're a translator, you want to get paid for the job that you've learned and studied for many years and get paid for translation. But if more people can now talk and anyone can afford a translator in their pocket, and you're just traveling and you're in the middle of nowhere, Vietnam, and you can just have a conversation with someone in a village there, it's amazing. And it's amazing that you didn't have to pay and wait for a translator to come with you and so on. And so I think there are a few areas where people enjoy not creating more jobs, like in medicine. Most people acknowledge that I'd rather have more healthy people rather than more jobs in medicine. But when you're affected yourself, it's understandable that there's criticism, but it's also hard to push against that progress. Just like Luddites who tried to destroy weaving machines because they took away the jobs of weavers, but now we all appreciate being able to afford clothes no matter where you are. So that's one other aspect that goes into this. And then a third one that you brought up with like privacy and stuff is actually one that I struggled with too. I tried, like U.com, I care a lot about privacy, and we tried a lot of like hardcore things to stay extremely private with everything. And then people complain. They're like, I want my history. I'm talking to the search engine, I want to keep my history. So then we started having a login and a history, and you actually save things. And then we tried various ways to have extremely privacy-preserving ads. And it turns out people don't want to pay for things. Like people will pay for a lot of stuff, but 5-10 euros per month for accurate information with no ads is not as exciting for a lot of people. And so we're going to see LMs also getting more and more ads in the future just because people don't want to pay. They would rather make the conscious or unconscious decision to get something for free and give up their privacy. And so at U.com, we still don't really have ads. Instead, we're focusing now on companies. And companies getting accurate answers, knowledge workers getting accurate answers. You pay for them; they will not be modified or manipulated by ads, and you can trust their accuracy. And that works for companies and knowledge workers. I don't know if it'll work for competing with Google.
One more question before we get to U.com. In the Web 2.0 revolution, of course, we gave away our data for free and it got monetized through advertising. Some critics of AI suggest that essentially this new language has been borrowed, to use a euphemism, from the rest of us. When we have a conversation today, you and I, Richard, no one's charging each other. We're not borrowing from a platform. No one's monetizing this conversation. But with AI, the big players, the Googles, the OpenAIs, maybe even the use.com, your startup, they're monetizing this new language. And it's a language it's a language that's intelligence is taken from humans themselves, from society. Is that a fair critique in the sense that we're not getting anything back, we the people, and it's only the titans of Silicon Valley, the Googles, the OpenAIs, the Sam Altmans, the Richard Sochers who are making a profit from all this?
Yeah, so I guess I feel like I could have still given another hour-long conversation, an answer to your previous trust question. But in terms of knowledge, yeah, indeed, the last 20 years, you could see Google benefiting from an open web. In fact, you could argue that the US and most any company that's online has benefited from an open web. And an open web means that knowledge and information is free. It's free to roam. It's free to express yourself. You could argue that that's pretty amazing, that anyone can now have a voice. It also creates a lot of complexities, right? Like one person's misinformation or disinformation is another person's freedom of speech. There's a lot of complexity there, and a lot of cultures answered that question differently. But ultimately, I think it's great when information is free and information can be stored I just saw some amazing multi-stage rocket imagery and research from the 1500s. NASA paper just came out talking about this Romanian engineer, and you can see it on my Twitter feed, X feed, I guess. It's amazing, and that knowledge was lost for many years, right? When the Library of Alexandria burned down, so much knowledge got lost. When you look at the what's it called, Antikythera mechanism, incredibly complex mechanisms that were found in a shipwreck, and that knowledge was lost for several hundreds of years, and then humans had to reinvent it. I think it's kind of sad how much knowledge had been lost in the past and then had to be rediscovered and slowed down humanity's progress. And now we will be much less likely, with the information being free, the internet being open, and AI being able to train from all of that. And yes, sometimes you say your cat was fluffy and the AI now learns that cats can be fluffy, but I think we're all better off for it, and we can now use certain capabilities that were impossible for anyone in the past. So maybe to put a finer point to this, I think whenever technology gets deeply ingrained in a field and goes to scale, it usually means that access to that capability and product and service will improve massively. So just concretely, right, a billionaire and a middle-class teenager will use the same phone. A billionaire still has access to services and products that you couldn't afford as a normal person. You can have, if you're wealthy enough, you can have your own healthcare team. You can have your own personal tutor for your kids. You can have your own personal assistant who will just make your life more convenient and easier to travel and book stuff and so on. With AI, every human can have their own personal health doctor team, their own personal tutor for their kids, and their own personal assistant. And I think in 50 years from now, everyone's like, yeah, of course that was awesome. I wouldn't want to have to do these things
no one's arguing about
anymore.
that, but does that have to go with the fact that the 6 or 7 largest tech companies in Silicon Valley are worth more than now most European countries? There is a dark side to that. They're profiting from what we've always taken for granted to be common public knowledge, language. Right. But it's another question. I don't want to get stuck in this. 2 more questions, Richard. I know you've got to run. Firstly, tell us more about U.com. What are you trying to do with it?
Yeah, so U.com is about accurate answers, agents, and AGI. We were the first to bring the web into answers so that LMs actually have citations, and you can trust them, they're up to date and accurate. We've tackled the hallucination problem better than anyone else. There are a lot of studies that showed this in independent research papers. We've done our own studies too. And what we found is that while going from 70%, which is where other systems often fall in their accuracy, to 95, might not matter as much to a random user on the internet who's much more susceptible to good marketing, it does matter a lot to companies and enterprises and knowledge workers. And so now we are working with one of the largest German insurance companies, one of the largest German publishers, the DPA, and the Wort- und Bildverlag, work with Maryville University, work with the Institute of Advanced Study in Princeton, where Einstein and Oppenheimer worked, and hedge funds and a bunch of other organizations. And it's those organizations that care about accurate answers and automating their workflows in a way that they can trust also with custom agents.
So you're not building personal assistants for everyday people?
It's becoming much more for knowledge workers.
What's a knowledge worker?
Yeah, you're a knowledge worker.
Am I? Don't feel like one.
Yeah.
Do I look like one?
Everyone who deals with knowledge has to get more complex answers than what's the weather tomorrow, what's the score of a game that just happened. Like people who work with knowledge, students, those are all kinds of knowledge workers. People who work in insurance and finance and publishing.
Finally, Richard, DLD now is celebrating its 20th anniversary. You're still quite a young man, I'm sure. 20 years, you'll still be at DLD. Where are we going to be in 2045? Gary Marcus, as I said, who was on the show earlier, he's well known, perhaps the world's leading skeptic of the current AI situation. Even he acknowledges that, in his words, AGI is inevitable, maybe by the mid-century. What's your sense of how deeply transformative AI will have become by 2045?
And even he started a startup, tech startup that got acquired by a very big company, like I think it was Uber. He also, as an AI skeptic, enjoys the benefits of AI.
You're not the first or the last person to note that.
And so I think in the next 20 years, a lot of exciting things are going to happen. I think the one thing I'm the most excited about is using AI for science. I think, again, most people don't say, oh yeah, I want more jobs in science. But a lot of people appreciate the outputs of science and the progress that it brings for humanity. And so if you can have a relentless 24/7 scientist that works on solving cancer, it will be really incredible for humanity. And so I think over the next 10 to 20 years, we're going to see a major disruption, the way we've seen with the Industrial Revolution, in terms of how jobs are changing. I think we're all very concretely going to become managers of AI. It's less and less about doing the work than it is about explaining how to do the work.
So it's Steve Jobs' bicycle for the mind.
It is very much that. Yeah, that is why I've been in 2003 very excited about linguistic computer science, is talking to computers, helping them help us with knowledge. I think that when humanity changes what it does and how it spends their day, that changes the human condition, period. I think that will create some problems for meaning. Work is very meaningful. Even a lot of people hate their work, but it gives them meaning. They're a productive member of society and so on. I think we're going to have to continuously discover what these new jobs are at higher levels of abstraction and productivity. They'll require still creativity and human empathy and problem solving, but also problem creation. And then as AI gets better and better at science, what does that mean? Well, what is science working on? Physics, like electricity, creating energy, fusion is likely going to make a lot of progress. Once you have more and more cheaper and cheaper and cleaner energy, that means you have no more water shortage problems because you can just desalinate ocean water. That will unlock a lot of productivity and just health and access to clean drinking water. Obviously, you're going to improve batteries with AI for chemistry. So we'll have better storage solutions also for this energy that's being created. And then we're going to see in biology a massive change. We've seen AlphaFold. I'm personally very excited and thinking about how to accelerate something like an alpha cell. No one can yet simulate very complex biologies, but with both quantum computers as well as just general, GPUs and such from NVIDIA and other companies, maybe in the future, we're going to massively accelerate what we can simulate, and anything that can be simulated, AI can solve problems in that domain. And so that will be just a little bit of the next 20 years.
So the best is yet to come, Richard Socher.
That's right.
Well, thank you so much, and we will continue this conversation over the next 20 years.
Looking forward to it.